Hello, and welcome back to DCN's series of podcasts in Democracy in Limelight. I'm Mkrtchyan, your moderator and host. Today, I have disinformation detectors with me, who are Karine Ghazaryan, fact-checking journalist at Media Initiative Center, and also we have Ciprian Kuku, disinformation and media literacy expert from Romania this time. He's a co-founder and vice president of Forum Apulum. With them, we will be discussing a very complex issue in our online public space, which is disinformation, how democracies are undermined. So far, dear guests, we see that we're all facing disinformation and also fake news. They are widespread, and those seeking to manipulate the online public sphere can decline levels of trust in our democratic institutions and experts. By this, do you think that democracy is in crisis? Can you describe some of the current challenges facing the digital information ecosystem and how online public sphere can come back to our life?
Yeah, well, Armenian democracy is very young, so we have declared a democratic state for a long time ago. But really, we had a semi-authoritarian regime, and since 2018, the government is trying more to establish a democratic state, to strengthen democratic institutions. But disinformation is truly one of the challenges to democratic institutions. And I think one type of disinformation, specifically conspiracy theories, which are quite common in Armenia and I think everywhere in the world, undermine democratic institutions strongly, because conspiracy theories are basically narratives that teach the public to be suspicious instead of being critically minded. They teach the public to not trust in what they can trust. So the right way to go on in the information space is checking our facts, perceiving everything critically, but not losing the trust, which is like a key to the healthy society. But the conspiracy theories, which are very common in Armenia, are teaching us to kind of not believe in the democratic institutions, like, for example, in elections, because they teach us that all this is fake and everything which is going on is basically manipulated from one center somewhere far, far away, like from a center where a Jewish guy, Soros, is sitting and deciding who is going to be our president or our prime minister, etc., etc. So this, I think, is one of the main challenges in Armenian context from what we have been observing these past 3 years.
This is sort of a globalization of disinformation. We're seeing more and more that the same narratives, the same topics, the same methods are used in various parts of the world, somewhat pointing to the same outcomes, which is sort of this general attack on democracy. And this is very interesting. And exactly like you were saying, we have this idea of a post-truth society in which we no longer really care about what's true or not, but whether what we want to be true, what we want to believe. And we're seeing this in Romania, and we're seeing it in Italy, and we're seeing it in the United States. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but for instance, the narratives that talk about election fraud, so the last elections in the US, they still exist, though this topic should have been cleared up, and there has been a lot of fact-checking written about these narratives, but it's still a reality. And not only that, but it's exported, like I was saying earlier. We've seen it in Romania as well. We've had elections in Romania a couple of months ago, and we see the same type of narratives that are trying to suggest that elections have been stolen, that there has been wide-scale fraud, which is obviously not true, that has no concrete evidence of that. But the thing is, it doesn't really matter. It provides the people with something to fall back on when the things around them don't go as they want to go. Unfortunately, societies get more and more polarized. So they just want to find the thing that confirms their belief. It doesn't matter if it's a conspiracy theory or if it's completely made up or if it has absolutely no data to back it up.
Yeah, I agree. And also, like, one important angle of this is that the disinformation does not always spread so-called naturally, so to say, naturally. Political actors, PR experts who work with political actors, they use this information. This is a service that PR firms, PR companies offer to their clients in political spectrum. So when, for example, in Armenia, after the Velvet Revolution, we witnessed how, for example, there is one interesting case of a PR professor. I don't want to call him professor because he's not really a researcher, but he taught PR in Yerevan State University. And then this guy became a political consultant for the one of the opposition forces, former government forces, which was now in opposition. And they basically started adopting the narratives, which worked really well in other societies, and bringing them inside Armenia and using them as a tool to kind of undermine certain processes. So we had this as a very calculated and designed project. This was not natural. Like, for example, when Armenia was trying to adopt the Istanbul Convention, which is a Council of Europe Convention against domestic violence and violence against women and children, this faced a huge backlash mainly from far-right groups. But this was not always the natural backlash. The narratives which spread in Latvia, in Bulgaria, in other countries that had problems with ratifying this convention, they were adopted in Armenia, and they were kind of offered by political consultants, by PR consultants to the political groups as a mean to combat their opponents. So basically we have a situation, I think globally, in Armenia, this is very, very evident, that the political forces, political parties basically adopted disinformation as one of the tools they use to work, to kind of push their agenda forward. And this is a huge problem because we cannot combat this with, for example, like standard fact-checking. Okay, we have fact-checking journalists doing fact-checking, but if a large-scale machine, for example, the opposition, which has resources, or the government, because in Armenia it's both, use disinformation to kind of achieve their goals, then a simple fact-checking will be not enough to kind of fight this.
Let's use this word weaponized. They have been weaponized in the political fight. And when I was listening to the case you're describing from Armenia, I remembered the book from Peter Pomerantsev, who kind of argues that in some way disinformation was used in the past as well to support an ideology or a political movement. But now it seems that it gets to the point where it becomes the political movement or the ideology. This idea that everything is somehow controlled by some nefarious groups of interests or some hidden cabals that try to undermine your way of life or your desires. And of course, when we get to organized political operatives and when we put some resources in it, and when we're talking about state actors, then we get the dimension of this fight, let's say, which we are kind of barely hanging on to, if I can say that myself.
Thank you. It's very amazing to be in the middle of two countries facing disinformation and those narratives that you talked about. It's very important. I wanted to highlight another question to both of you as you represent different countries, and also you can share some international maybe best cases, best practices. So what your governments are doing to solve those issues that you were talking about, maybe you would give some recommendations to them as well, or maybe you can agree or disagree how enough it is to solve those issues.
Well, Armenian government right now is in a bit of a crisis situation. We just had elections, which were snap elections. We had a war. And during a war, there is no information, there is only propaganda. So, but the Armenian government has been complaining about the disinformation. They call this media terror. And they blame the opposition for doing this media terror. And they blame the opposition, which I don't think it is baseless. There are groups sitting there, and their only job is to create disinformation and overwhelm the society, just as you described. But the government itself is not doing anything to combat this, aside from complaining. There are multiple ways. I mean, this is a very serious challenge. I don't think any government has like this silver bullet against this. But reacting quickly and informing the society in a comprehensive manner about complex issues is a key here. When you have some important issue, like, for example, vaccination during the pandemic, the best thing you can do is equipping your society as much as possible with the best quality information, which is backed by facts, which will kind of help them to make good decisions for their health. Lacking in bureaucracy will give the disinformation actors a huge advantage to fill this gap, to fill this space with as much bad information as possible, after which the damage control will be very difficult. If a person believes in a conspiracy narrative or in a very alarming disinfo narrative, the chances you are going to kind of fix this, the chances that you are going to make them believe the fact-check kind of scientific informations are quite low. So I think one of the things is working with the communication that you have with your public. And I don't know, maybe another thing is, this is very repetitive. I am sure everyone who has listened to us is tired of this, but promoting media literacy is very, very important. I mean, like, not everyone in the government is media literate. I mean, we have so many people in the key positions who are not media literate. And this is a problem, but we have to explain them that they need to promote this very much. Like, they need to promote this with the alphabet in schools. Because this is like the new media is the first thing our children get in touch. Before they get in touch with traditional text, they have the new type of media with them. So teaching them to kind of find their way in this environment is crucial, and nothing can be more important than this. I would teach them media literacy before I would teach them reading and writing.
That's a very interesting take on this. And of course, everybody is speaking about it, but nobody really seems to know how to do it or how to do it well. There's a lot of discussion about it. Unfortunately, we don't have in Romania very good results on that as well. We actually have a huge issue with functional illiteracy in young people. We are constantly looking and, complaining as members of the civil society that there's not enough done in this. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem that they have found a way to correct these things. But, I don't want to digress. This is about the problems of the educational system at large. We're trying as an NGO, and other NGOs in Romania trying to kind of fill in the gap as much as possible. Unfortunately, it's very, very difficult to do that. So as we were saying earlier, that, misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theories are a problem for democracies, and they erode trust in democracy and in the government. We can actually see that the opposite phenomena is happening as well. Because of the lack of trust in the government, which sometimes is warranted, people get to believe crazy stuff. They get to follow all sorts of influencers and all sorts of crazy Facebook pages and outlets, blogs, and things like that push these narratives and convince people that the government is lying to them, because the government is not always transparent. And we have this issue as well, and civil society has over and over again demanded increase in transparency and increase in accountability from government leaders. We have a huge scandal with some contracts for buying face masks at the beginning of the pandemic, because you always have kinds of these individuals or networks that want to take advantage of every situation, but you do need to have a state authorities that are capable of saying, no, this should not work this way. We should be fully transparent about these processes, about buying stuff from public money, about what's working and what's not working, what measures we want to take, why do we want to take it, how well we're doing with the fighting of the pandemic or some other stuff as well, because this is not a new thing. It has been going on for quite some time. So again, I fully agree. Media literacy is very important, but also, transparency.
Really, that's the most epic part. I really hope that our audience has taken a lot from our experts, and they will also give some feedback on what they have been hearing. And eventually, we'll have a society that is not filling the gaps, but also adding more value in what we are doing for our future. So thank you so much. See you for the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.
The following series of podcasts are being conducted by Digital Communication Network in partnership with Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom.